Hey, this is David, Fairly Secret Music again. I want to do some albums that are bands that people probably haven't heard of or are very little known bands. First album I'm going to start with is The Awful Truth. This was the original band that the bass player and the drummer from the Galactic Cowboys were in. They had a guitarist named uh, David King or something like that. Let me see. David Von King. He sang and did the lead vocals, but the drummer and the bass player also did vocals kind of in King's X kind of fashion. These guys don't have the guitar tone of King's X, but they do have the vocal harmonies that King's X were really good at when Sam Taylor was with them. This album is produced by Sam Taylor. Um, it was their only album before they broke up, and then the drummer and the bass player started Galactic Cowboys. If you like Galactic Cowboys, if you like King's X, you might want to check these guys out. They're super awesome. I really enjoyed this album when it came out, and I accidentally found it one day. And on the back, you had this picture, and it listed what everybody played, and it was listed just like King's X used to do it, where it said their instrument and then just said vocals behind, and it didn't say lead vocals at all. Probably the best song on here. Oh, they don't have the stupid song titles on there. Probably the best song on here probably would be Circle, I think. I really like Ghost of Heaven too. They had a lot of really catchy things on here, but the guitar parts didn't really sound like what King's X or Galactic Cowboys ended up doing. This guitarist was a little bit less flashy, but served the purpose of this band. I really liked him. Beyond Dawn. They had Revelry and Electric's, what is it called? Electric Sulking Machine. Let me make that. These guys were from Norway or something like that. And this album is a little bit more electronic, kind of the 1 second era of Paradise Lost, kind of similar to that, or the Sin Pecado era of Moonspell. Their singer has a really low voice. They had a guy who plays trombone in the band, which might not appeal to some people, but if you listen to this album, I bet you will be very surprised at how much you enjoy the fact that the trombone is in there, and it doesn't sound odd. It just sounds awesome. There's a line on this album where it says, what does she say? They have a sample of a woman saying, "I'm clean, trust me," which I always thought was interesting. And as I said before, a singer, really low voice, kind of Peter Steele. Sorry, my nose is itching. Peter Steele-ish kind of. What's his name from Moonspell? Just check this one out. This is their best album. Damn the Machine. This has Chris Poland and his brother on drums and guitar, and they have another guitarist who sings and a bass player. I accidentally missed this concert. I decided I was going to hang out with my girlfriend instead, and that was like 93 or something like that. What an idiot. They were opening up for Voivod on the Outer Limits tour. This is kind of proggy, kind of metal, kind of what you would expect from a former guitarist from Megadeth, but with vocals that are much cleaner than Megadeth and a little bit more progressive, I guess. The Mission, Lonesome God, and Fall of Order are my two favorite songs on here. Diamond Nights. The little blurb on here, it says, if Cheap Trick were covering the new pornographers. It also compares them to Thin Lizzy and the fucking Champs, too. So, what do they sound like? They sound like a hair metal band with indie pop rock sensibilities, I guess, but with lyrics that sound like they could have been written by one of those kind of cock rocky hair metal bands from the 80s. Listen to the first song. You might dig it. If you don't, oh well. Frantic Bleep. This was a band, I think it was a supergroup kind of Norwegian or like European band members. I don't really know much about it. I didn't look it up before I did this video. The second track on here is called The Expulsion, and I believe that was my favorite song. I've only listened to this a few times, but it kind of has a feel of if you took a little bit of Voivod or Sup or Suppuration, which is a French band that kind of sound like a death metal version of Voivod, and then mixed them with like some Arcturus or In the Woods, and then shoved Tulle on there. A little bit of Tulle. Not a lot of Tulle, but just a little bit. Hammers of Misfortune. I'm going to go in backwards. This is their newest album. I have only listened to this once, so I can't really comment on it. This has a different bass player than probably the previous album, which is called 17th Street, which is a really dumb name if you ask me, but I believe it's a concept album. This is also on Metalblade. They did this album, which was Fields and Church of Broken Glass. Two complete albums. They each have their own booklet. I can show you that. When they went to Metalblade, they started redoing all their stuff, and this was one that I actually hadn't gotten. And each album is in these little sleeves, and they have their own booklet with each album, which is cool. At least Metalblade kind of know what to do about doing good packaging sometimes. Sometimes they do packaging like this and it's a complete failure, like all the Fates Warning remasters have just some of the worst packaging, because the CDs go in there and then they stick to the glue that keeps the package together. This is their third album, and this is on Cruz del Sur. This album, let's see, is called The Locust Years, and the title track is awesome, but my favorite is a song called Trot Out the Dead. And at this point, they still had the singer-guitarist from Lord Weird's Slow Fae. They're also called Slow Fae now. But I believe the two guitarists that were in the band at this time were both in both bands at the beginning, and each of them kind of split off. Hammers of Misfortune end up sounding kind of like they kind of have that Iron Maiden-y kind of quality, that gallop to them at times, but they do have a organ player, this blonde woman, and then this was their bass player. They've always had female bass players as far as I know. Maybe not on one of these two, but definitely on the first three albums. Before that was this album, which is called, sorry, The August Engine. Same lineup as the Locust years. And let me see here. The August Engine and Room and a Riddle are the best, or my favorite, two songs on here. They still had John Cobbett, Janice Tanaka, Mike Scalzi, Chris Force from, she played on a Neurosis album. I didn't realize that on this album Janice Tanaka was still on bass, because she is on their first album, which is called The Bastard, and this is actually my favorite album by them. It has some death metal vocals, but whereas these other ones don't, and it's just the most interesting one to me, especially for the fact that they recorded it all on 8-track. Lethal. This is a weird band because I think they have had other albums before or past this, but around this time, which was 1990, I believe after this album came out, Dream Theater asked him to sing, and he passed on them, or at least this is what I read, that Dream Theater were looking for a singer. They asked him if he would sing with them. He said he wanted to focus on Lethal, and Lethal are pretty much a whisper in time. What would Dream Theater have sounded like if they had this guy? Who knows? I don't know if he would have come up with the same vocal melodies or anything similar to what James LaBrie did. I wonder if people would be more accepting of his voice over James LaBrie, because I know a lot of people don't like James LaBrie. I think he's fine. I just kind of get tired of him every once in a while. I get tired of all of Dream Theater stuff every once in a while, though. So, my favorite songs on here were Immune and Obscure the Sky. I think Killing Machine or Pray for Me were the anti-religion. One line is, a Christian thrust a thorn in my side, empties his pockets as the whore walks by. I like lyrics like that. I think they're entertaining. Fire in Your Skin was also a pretty darn good song. This is one of the worst album covers I've ever seen. What is that? It's just that's bad. Chris Poland, Return to Metropolis, 2002 reissue, remixed and remastered. Chris Poland, again, should not have any introduction. He was the original second guitarist in Megadeth, and in my opinion, the best guitarist they had. That's just my opinion. He sounds very much like Alan Holdsworth, and I love Alan Holdsworth's stuff. He has the most fluid guitar playing. This album was supposed to have vocals on it, but they couldn't find a vocalist, so they just added guitar solos, and he and his brother did everything on it. He plays bass and guitar, and his brother plays drums. I can't really remember which songs are my favorites, but I believe Fall of Babylon, Row of Crows, and Khazad-dûm were the three really standout instrumental tracks. Well, they're all instrumental tracks. Because I remember the end of each side being just fantastic. Subrosa, whose sweatshirt I am wearing. It has this picture on the back. I wish it had that on the front of this sweatshirt. That would have been way cooler. The Usher is the best track on here. More Constant Than Gods is the name of the album. Wait, let's see. Yeah, my favorite song was The Usher. I think this album kind of physically made me sick. The first couple times I listened to it, I might have just been getting sick anyway, but sometimes very discordant music, I think can have an effect on you, especially if you're listening to it while you're going to sleep. And the other thing that I had that happen to with was a Schnittke string quartet. Man, it was discordant, and it is fantastic. I love it. This is their second or third album. I can't remember. There's an album before this that I don't have yet. For this, We Fought the Battle of Ages is their newest album. I've only listened to this once. I just recently got it. But they have 2 violin players, a guitarist who also sings, bass player and drummer. And the bass player and drummer are the only 2 guys in the band. All the rest are ladies. Just really interesting, really just awesome. Vicious Rumors, Digital Dictators. This album shouldn't really need much of an introduction. They were pretty popular, kind of underground metal band in the 90s. I know they were on a major label, but this album is their second album after Vinnie Moore left the band. And if you don't remember Vinnie Moore, he was kind of a shredder. He was also on Shrapnel. Then he went to a major label and did an album called Time Odyssey, which is just one of the greatest instrumental albums, along with the Chris Poland album. This band had a guy named Carl Albert on vocals, and I believe he has passed away. The song Digital Dictator and the closing song Out of the Shadows were my 2 favorite songs on this album. And they had backwards message at the end of it, and when you played it forward, it said, stay in school, don't do drugs, listen to your parents, or don't be mean to your parents, or whatever. I thought that was pretty funny because all those PMRC people were like, oh, they got backward messages, and then they play it backwards and it's a positive message. So good for them. Last one, White Fear Chain, Visceral Life. This is a band with Last Cracks singer Butto and 2, maybe 3 guys from the band The Realm who were on Roadrunner. They had a really high singer. And this has hints of Last Crack, has hints of like kind of Alice in Chains. It came out in 96. I got this directly from the bass player because he was working at the courier place that I was working at. And I bumped into him at a place called Root Cellar Records that used to be in St. Paul. And if you think of the guitar part from Alice in Chains' Dirt, there's one song called either Daily into Darkness or Before You Go. I think it's Before You Go. That's very similar to that Alice in Chains guitar part. The lyrics are pretty smart. Butto is a fantastic singer. The guitars, all the playing is just really great. Some of the songs I like way better than others, but the ones that are really good and stand out are really well worth buying this album for. It might be harder to find, but give it a shot. I know it's on YouTube that you can listen to. So that's a bunch of obscure kind of stuff, and I hope you find something that you like.